Welcome to Tales from the Waystone, a King Killer Chronicle reread podcast in name at this point, but maybe not in practice for a little while. We are your hosts, Will and Phoenix.
Let's get into it. Happy New Year, everyone. This is going to be our last installment of King Killer coverage for the foreseeable future.
It is not. We have one more
That's right. We've got our coverage of the Prelude.
of book 3 that was released, I don't remember how long ago.
So we thought it'd be appropriate here, since we've wrapped up The Wise Man's Fear, to just do a little bit of a look back on on where we've been and some of the things that have jumped out at us, talk about our hopes for the future of the series, and share what we're planning for the future of the podcast.
This is not our standard pod, so I'm not going to do my normal spiel, but spoilers for the entirety of what is available to read from the King Killer Chronicle. Theories abound. We don't know anything. We can talk about our hopes, our dreams, or how does the series stop from becoming like lost, and what would it take for us to feel like it wrapped up cleanly and nicely, but knowing that there isn't a need in the strictest sense for it to ever be finished. There's a want. There is a really big want. Just like I assume every one of you really wants the series to have a nice bow put on it. But there are other books to read, and we're going to talk about some of our favorite ones to recommend, whether they be fantasy novels or not. But as always, please be kind to yourselves and one another and to the creators of the worlds that we love exploring.
So let's start by taking a look at the past. Let's look back and see what sort of themes and through lines jumped out at us over the past 2 books that we've covered.
I'll let you start.
All right. One of the things that's interesting to me is this is an adult narrator recounting their childhood. And I'm wondering how much Kvothe the narrator has really grown from Kvothe the kid.
Also, this is a very linear story. I don't know about you, but there is no way that I, as an adult, can look back at my childhood and tell a story in a linear fashion from start to finish that encompasses me as a 12-year-old through me as a 20-year-old.
Yeah, there are a lot of very specific events. I think it's also interesting, like how, a lot of the stories and things that he tells are just kind of little one-off side adventures or whatever that don't really bear a whole lot of repeated fruit.
Explain that.
Well, like thinking about when Kvothe goes from being alone in the woods to Tarbean, there's a lot of stuff in there that's just never really revisited. We've got characters like Savoy who just kind of disappear partway through Name of the Wind, never to be seen again.
Okay, that's because Pat forgot about him.
That's fair.
He has said that that's because he forgot about it.
I'm just curious where, if at all, they're going to come back.
Do you think we're going to revisit characters like Scarpy? Because we did go back and revisit Trappist.
So there's a couple characters that I think I would like to see revisited. I don't need, but would like to. Scarpy, like you say. Also Abinthy.
Abinthy is a big, why didn't you look him up?
Right. Like, you knew where he left. You knew where he went to. What happens next with him?
It would be nice if he's got a part of the story, if there is a grander part for him to play. There are characters that are left mysterious because Kvothe doesn't have the same type of relationship with them. I want more about Master Lauren.
Master Lauren's definitely a figure of mystery.
And I want explanations for characters like Ari. Denna, I'm content to let have her secrets. It's a boundary. I don't know that she works as her character if we know everything about her.
Yeah, Denna lives in the land of hints and allegations.
And honestly, I don't think Kvothe works as a character if he actually becomes an open book. So yeah, those are some big character things that I want to evolve naturally and not to be forced. We know that Pat, in theory, has an end point, and it all feels like everything is pointing to an end point. which is probably one of the reasons why it's so rereadable. But let's talk about also the theories that have been built around and built up and had time to develop more and more and more and more. I don't think there are any new theories to be found that someone hasn't touched on. And if you want an exhaustive, everything from plausible to kind of bat
Sure.
crazy, just go to the Reddit. But the ones that I think are likely to pan out include Kvothe's aunt being Maelwyn. That one's like the big one. Master Lauren possibly being part of the Amir. Also, Mayor Alvaron being part of the Amir. Those are some of the bigger ones that I agree. Also, Master Ash being Cinder.
Also being Braden.
Right. I think that those are very large hints that were left. And I would hate to see the years steal that from the story just because we've guessed it.
I'm also going to say that even if those specific things end up being true, those answers still bring with them greater mysteries that I think are just as interesting. Like let's take the whole Master Ash Cinder slash Braden thing. If that's the case, what the hell is his game? Like, what's he doing going to Ventus and leading a bunch of small time bandits whose goal seems to be just disrupting tax collection? Like, I mean, I'm not kidding. Like, if this is truly a supernatural being from ancient prehistory, what's his game? Like, clearly he's got one, but why? I'm curious what that is. And I'm interested to find out why he's there and doing just, like I say, small time stuff. Granted, small time stuff done at a high level, but still seems like a small game. Then we find out with Melo and Lackless if she is indeed Kvothe's aunt. I'm really curious what went on between her and Lorien. What's the true story actually like?
There are theories that Arleden isn't Kvothe's biological parent. That could be an interesting thing to explore. There are theories about the Cathay, and there are theories about Iax and Heliax and Lanray and all of the mythological kind of prehistory stories. There's the Kvothe is the reincarnation of Tamerlane the Great. There's the Lackless box, or whatever the box is that Kvothe has at the end of the story, like being made of the same wood that imprisons the Cathay.
I've been actually thinking a bit about the Cathay as well. This is less a theory and more an observation. So the Cathay, if we take the whole Cathay's Celatos theory, so this really reminds me of the story of Odin, who sacrifices an eye and hangs from a tree, and in exchange is granted omniscience, the secret of runes, these oracular powers. And I'm wondering if the Cathay is a Fey version of this. Like, so as part of some bargain, Celatos loses an eye, gains power to see possibilities, but is then bound to this tree. Like, the tree that he's part of is the world tree. So he can see all the branches and possibilities. Like, what does that do to a person? What are his actual aims? We have the answer that Bast gives, which is that this is really just pure malice and malevolence. But if we also accept that Celatos is the root of the Amir, who are sort of the greater good at all cost types,
The greater good.
the greater good, who will do horrible things to achieve a greater outcome. If we take that mentality and apply it to someone with this omniscience, this ability to see all possibilities, in the short run, you might think that the things that that person is doing are leading to all kinds of calamity and catastrophe. But if they're playing a really long game, you don't know what their end is. It might be towards something that they believe is a true good. And I'm curious to see that play out. Like I say, I don't have any answers or theories about what is or will be, but I think it does give us some clues and insights into what might happen and how it could happen.
So, overarching, the story feels storybook like because it does have that sequential this happened and there's no doubling back. It's like reading a book within a book because the way that the older Kvothe is telling the story is so much a start to finish.
It feels like a memoir almost.
Yes, I agree with you. It doesn't sound like a storyteller telling a story. Oh, but I forgot this part and I'm going to go back and tell you about it. Let's put a pin in this part of the timeline and go back. In the overworld, do you have any theories about, is Noir even real? Is Kvothe the king killer? Like, what king did he kill? Is Bast his imprisoner, his liberator, his guard, his student solely? Is he a plant? Is he a gatekeeper?
Is he all of the above?
Or is everything altruistic and they met in a completely innocuous way, a completely innocent way, and Kvothe just took him on as a student? Like, do we think that there's a nefarious motive?
So, based on what we know of Bast from the main books and then also from The Narrow Road Between Desires, he's someone who I think is generally benevolent in that he is not acting with malice or purely for destructive intent. He's certainly selfish. He cares about getting what he wants.
He's manipulative.
He is manipulative. He's a rogue, he's a trickster, but at the same time he does have a caring streak. He's moved by seeing people hurt, people victimized. He cares about those who are downtrodden. And I think he does have an affinity for children, like because he has a childlike element to him as well. And in that purely innocent way, he is someone who values the insight of kids. He listens to them and takes them seriously in a way I think a lot of adults fail to do. So I think Bast, whatever else he is, I think he is ultimately someone who is heroic. What we also know about Bast is that he doesn't understand humans perfectly, and I think he has bought into this heroic version of who Kvothe is for whatever reason and is trying to do anything he can to reawaken it.
Do you think he's trying to break him out of a prison?
That's the feeling I get.
Do you think that chroniclers stumbling upon the inn, upon Kvothe, upon this space was by accident? Do you think he was called in? Did we get an explicit Bast actually called him to the inn?
As I understand it, there was a bit where Bast explains that he's the one who sent out the rumors that Kvothe could be found here, and that's why Chronicler traveled this far.
It's been a long road, guys. We've read 2 books in 4 years or 5 years.
My operating theory, and I think I set this out at the very beginning, is that Kvothe, the narrator, actually represents the apex of that character's abilities. Kvothe, the narrator, never could do the things that Kvothe, the main character of his story, could actually do, and never did a lot of those things. That he is a damn good storyteller and also a damned liar.
Interesting. You think all of it's bravado?
Yes, I think it's all
Bullshit.
It's flim flam, it's malarkey, it's jibba jabba, it's horse hockey.
Do you also think that as a kid, he was just exceptional at sowing rumor and story instead of actually doing any of the things he said he did?
Yeah, I think that's basically been his gift. I'm not saying he isn't intelligent. I'm not saying he doesn't have a great memory, which I think he does, but I think that it's a lot of misdirection and trickery.
You don't think he called the wind?
Not one bit.
You don't think that he saved people from a false troop of, like, pretty much just assaulters?
Correct. I think that's all malarkey.
You don't think that he ever went to live in the palace of the mayor?
Not even a little bit. I think he may have lived in the palace, but not as an invited guest. I think he might have gone and lived as a servant. I think he may have tagged along for a lot of things and told the story of it, of how he thought it happened.
Do you think that he ever went to the university?
Oh, I bet he went there. I'm not saying he actually did everything he did there.
Do you think that he wound up in the crockery?
It's entirely possible.
This very easily, to me, could be, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there. I do question if the story we've been reading is even a story that's real.
Right.
But I also think that it could be.
It could be.
But I think that that's a less satisfying ending for the most part to this grand tale, to the Wizard of Oz it. I don't know that I would be as satisfied with that as an ending as I would with this all being real and us finding out that both the arcane, the whatevers, is being suppressed and him coming back into his powers.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, we were all hoping he's one training montage away, set to a rousing, Eye of the Tiger or whatever, and he goes and trains with Carl Weathers. We get it. That'd be fun. But like I say, I have my theory. I also know that it's kind of a cruel ending.
Isn't it like St. Elsewhere? The whole story of the entire series was in the mind of one child.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that theory, but this is more like the story that he has been telling the world is all lies and everything that people believe about him is false, that he doesn't have any actual special abilities or anything like that. Doing something like that would be very cruel to the character, I think. And especially it would be the story of him getting his comeuppance.
Do you think that that would be satisfying to readers?
Probably not.
Do you think that if that theory is true, might be preventing the series from ending?
Yep. Because here's the thing, the story in the story that narrator Kvothe has been weaving resonates with people. It's satisfying. And then if you're told that none of that actually happened, none of that actually mattered, you might feel a little cheated.
What do you think is in the box?
I don't think it matters. Honestly, I like at this point the box is it's mystery box storytelling, and that's very fun while you're in the middle of it, but oftentimes there is no satisfactory answer that will truly make all of it have been worthwhile.
Hmm.
If we look at Peak Lost, for instance, was built around this idea of the mystery box. What's in the box? And I want answers, and you can't have answers. That was the central push and pull of Lost, because they knew that as soon as they opened the mystery box and revealed whatever it was, whether that's the island itself or the hatch or whatever, they'd have to find another mystery box and another and another and another. And it was never as satisfying as the act of puzzling over them. And when done without a great deal of forethought, it ended up being really unsatisfying. Because by the end of it, they had introduced so many new mystery boxes because they kept getting renewed past when they thought they were going to be ending, that none of that could pay off.
Right. But in theory, Pat has an idea of what the ending is.
But he's also thrown a whole bunch of new mystery boxes in along the way.
But has he?
So we've got the Lackless box. We've also got...
You suggest that those were thrown in. I wonder if they were planned. There are a lot of mysteries that, if the third book is to be released, a lot of people will want a lot of answers. What do you think are your top wants?
So I think I want to know what's the deal with the Chandrian. That from the very beginning, the question is, what's their plan, right? What's their deal, man? What gets their rocks off? Why do they care about anything? I also want to know what's the deal with the Aemir, right? Like, again, what's their deal? I think I also would like to know genuinely some conclusion to the clash between Kvothe and Cinder. Like, has that already happened? Is that pending? I want to know who's Kvothe hiding from, right? Like, what is so bad that he has to run off to
The ash end of
nowhere and open up an inn and change his name and wait to die? Like, if he's truly waiting to die or whatever, there's got to be faster ways than going to open up an inn somewhere.
I think that my top wants are to know what the relationship between Bast and Kvothe really is. I want to know what's in the box, but I also think that that should be at the end of the story if it's truly important.
I think the other thing that I'd like to see Kvothe actually be as good a friend to Will and Sim as they are to him.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
I'd like to know a resolution to Ari's story. Not necessarily who was she before she was in the sewers or in the Underthing, because I think that that's unimportant to the major story. I think that was introduced as a mystery that doesn't need an answer, but more I want to see that she's taken care of as a character.
Yeah, I'm curious how she fits into the larger narrative because so much of her presence in the story feel like digressions that don't always drive the rest of the narrative forward.
I want to know how the Fae is actually connected to this world. And to that end, and I'm apologizing, I know that I saw something at one point where Nate Taylor was on a panel and started talking about things that he is aware of that are part of the larger world of the Four Corners of Temerant, of the connection with the Fae. And he let some things slip, and I cannot for the life of me find a clip of this any longer.
I'm also curious what's behind the four-plate door.
Yeah, that one is like another mystery box that it hasn't been brought up in so long that I kind of forgot about it.
I think I'm also curious about so when we first get introduced to Cinder and Haliax, Haliax has that bit about who protects you from the Aemir, the Singers, and the Sith.
So, who are the other two groups?
Yeah, we've gotten an explanation from Bass that the Sith basically hunt anyone who's been connected with the Cathay, but what's the deal with, quote, the Singers? Who are they? What role do they have in all of this? And how do the Adem fit into it? I'd also like to see a return of Tempe, who kind of just disappears from the narrative after Kvothe has extended training montages.
Pretty much everyone kind of disappears from the narrative. And I wonder if that's intentional. If Kvothe marches forward and disregards the past, and if that's a coping mechanism, what the motivation behind that is. So I guess my question is, with so much stuff that needs a resolution, quote, that we would want to see a resolution for, how important is it to you that everything gets a resolution?
I don't think we are going to get a resolution to everything. I think it's okay to leave some things open ended as long as it feels like that choice is deliberate. Like, this is something that I'm leaving open to you, the readers, to figure out on your own or think about or come up with your own answers, versus I kind of forgot about it.
Four-plate door, I kind of forgot about it.
Yeah.
Puppet, I kind of forgot about him. These books are so full, and we have been reading 2 books for the equivalent of, I think we started in 2019. So that means 5 years.
Yep.
And there are always details that when we go back to them, I'm like, oh yeah, that. Oh yeah, that. Oh, right, that. And I think it's very potential that it is too big for its britches at this point.
Yeah.
So unless the book starts with kind of starting to draw close some of those open-ended things, because I don't feel like we've gotten any resolutions to all of the open-ended questions. We maybe have gone over events that were mentioned at the beginning, because there's that list when Chronicler is talking to Kvothe of, you did this and you did that and whatever. And so we've seen some of those events happen and the resolution to those events, but there's the questions. Again, all of those questions, I think, is what's driving the rereads and the interest and the desire for another book this long after the last book was published. And why, when a novella that is a rewrite and an expansion of something that was only available in an anthology, is both gobbled up and mildly disappointing to the community as a whole. I liked it. I kept my expectations low. I knew that it wasn't about Kvothe and that it wouldn't tell us anything new about the overarching story, that it is a one-off, much like the one-off about Ari, in the style of the character it's about. Again, should anyone want me to go over the Slow Regard of Silent Things, I'd love to do that on the Patreon as kind of a freebie thing, but not as a mainline podcast. But it's definitely the narrow road is definitely just a Bass story. And when people are clamoring for more Kvothe's story, it's not as satisfying. But I also want to make it very clear Patrick Rothfuss is a person. He owes us nothing.
Yeah, I've kind of taken it to the point where I have made peace with the fact that we may not get a third book. And I'm kind of okay with it because I've had a great time reading these two books and change. And the thing about good stories is they're about the journey as much as they are about the destination. And like if you're gonna approach it as well, this is kind of just a long and rambling drive through the countryside, and that's kind of the point. Regardless of where it ends up, it ends at an arbitrary point, and then you drive back and you saw some cool country along the way, some fun things happened along the way, and that's got to be enough. And I've made my peace with that's what I'm probably gonna have here. This isn't the only book that I've taken this tack with. I'm at this point with the Song of Ice and Fire books. Again, books that I love, but ultimately I don't think we're ever going to get the end of the series that everybody wants. And I think I'm going to have to be okay with that. I'm not approaching it with anger or sadness, just acceptance.
I think that being angry over something like this is such a waste of your energy.
There are enough real things to be angry about in our lives.
I don't need this to be an anger inducing thing. I want it to be a hopeful thing. What I want is to keep the love of this story alive and encourage Pat to write what he wants to write and try to shut out the noise of what everybody else wants. But also to approach it if it doesn't make you happy to write about this, you can scrap it.
Exactly. Like I say, I want to remove the expectation or pressure because the journey that we've been on has been good in its own right, and it doesn't need to have anything else.
But to that end, I think maybe it's time for us to talk about other things because occasionally what I'll see in discourse is you do know that it is just a book series and you can read other things. And so here's my question because a lot of people say you can read other things but don't give an answer to what. What?
So, yeah, a couple things that I've enjoyed. I mean, if we go back to foundational stuff, Terry Pratchett's Discworld is always going to be a solid rec for me.
There are so many Discworld books also. Are there some that are your favorites?
So I am particularly a fan of anything that's in the Watch series. So that's from Guards and Men at Arms and Jingo and Feet of Clay and Night's Watch and on and on and on. There's a bunch of them. I'm also a big fan of the Granny Weatherwax. Those are always fun stories there for me as well. Because those are the ones that really dig into the knot of modernity and how we relate to it, how we live in societies. They deal with what is good, what is just, what is right, in situations where it's not always immediately easy to either see or do. And it's about how to find clarity and how to find a point of action, understanding that your area of concern may be much larger than your area of influence, and how to help the two line up.
I like the Wee Free Bin.
Those are fun as well. With Rihanna Pratchett, his daughter, taking over a lot of the co authoring duties on those. She's a wonderful writer in her own right. Other authors I've really enjoyed are John Scalzi, mostly in science fiction. I find his writing pretty breezy. It's easy to approach. I could power through one of his books in a couple hours usually. And, they end up being fun little fantasies of what it's like for the mundane to intersect with the fantastical. A couple that I've really enjoyed are Red Shirts. That one, just as a lifelong Star Trek fan, really speaks to me. I also recently read Kaiju Preservation Society, which was a lot of fun. As a Godzilla fan, naturally, this is my jam. I also really enjoyed Starter Villain, which was kind of a weird spy-fi fiction. Kind of felt like something out of a James Bond novel or something, like a really far-fetched James Bond novel. A lot of really interesting, just enjoyable reads. His characters tend to be engaging and warm, and they also deal with how do you deal with ethical conundrums living in our modern society? So, some good recommendations from me.
I would recommend if you're interested in stories with LGBTQIA characters to read pretty much all of Alice Osman's books. Heartstopper, of course, which you can read for free on Tapas, and I need to read the most recent ones. But also, I Was Born for This and Radio Silence and Loveless are really lovely books. And they're pretty fast reads and more slice of life and not so much on the sci-fi or fantasy level of things. I do enjoy Mistborn, and much to the chagrin of a lot of other people that like to talk about their favorite books, I did not enjoy its sequels, mostly because I feel like there was a lot of Trinity syndrome that kind of happened, and it infuriated me. But I also feel like maybe if I'm going to get into Brandon Sanderson's work as a whole, I might go back and give them more tries, and probably on audiobook, and let's just hope I don't fling my tablet across the room because I'm enraged again. I also recommend pretty much everything that I have read from N.K. Jemisin, not just the urban fantasies that we have gone over with The City We Became and The World We Make, but I do really like the Broken Earth trilogy. The first one is very, very strong. The second two are less strong, but I think are still really worth reading. I am in the middle of the Inheritance. Sorry, I am not. I have read through the first 2.5 of the Inheritance trilogy, and I'm really enjoying that. It's a interestingly different take on political intrigue within a fantasy setting. Also, I think that at least the first book of the Dreamblood duology, The Killing Moon, very interestingly different setting than most high fantasy European settings, whatever Western culture based things that I've read.
That one really sticks with me. Like, I just keep thinking back to some of the imagery that she calls up. Like, even now, a couple years after I read it, like, it's just some of that just sticks with you.
Exactly. It's different, it's unique, it's taking cultural cues that you don't always find in books of that genre. And I think it is important to read books from a different perspective. I read, when I was growing up, all of Anne McCaffrey's books from the Dragon Riders of Pern. And I think as a foundational fantasy series, that was a great thing for me to do. Rereading it now, you can see the mentality and the sexism inherent in the time frame in which it was written. So I think it's an important one to also interrogate.
I kind of feel the same way about Lord of the Rings. Like, again, deeply love it. I also recognize it's got some very
Questionable?
questionable ideals that are rooted in the specifics of the British Empire, certain cultural assumptions here and there, and prejudices that I don't think Tolkien himself was even aware of as he was writing them. But I think, again, if you were to point them out to J.R.R. Tolkien in his prime and talk to him about these things, he would probably actually be really fascinated by your thoughts on these. I think when we look at these things where they're foundational texts, and everything that comes after kind of exists in conversation with them. You know, a lot of the stuff that happens in modern fantasy we wouldn't have if it wasn't for Tolkien. You know, the idea of a book that starts with maps.
And I love books that start with maps.
Me too. It's kind of a guilty pleasure. Maybe not so guilty.
I also like things that have a glossary or a list of terms so that you can kind of go back and look at all of the proper nouns and go, oh, that's what that is. To that end, I read a lot of Mercedes Lackey when I was a teenager. Again, prolific author, really interesting setting, very much a product of its time. But if you want to just go through, you can pick up a book in the series and it's not really hugely important where it is in the timeline. That one's a interesting shout. That series, I can't even remember. Can you look it up for me? Because you have your phone and I don't.
Sure. It's like,
Has to do with horses a lot.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of horse girl stuff.
There is a lot of horse girl stuff. But what's the series name?
Um,
Do you have Audible? You can probably find out or you can just say series name.
I'm just looking at all of her books.
I'm aware.
All right. So there's The Last Herald.
Oh, the Herald series. Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you look at Mercedes Lackey, like the Herald series is kind of that landmark one where if you pick up anything, it doesn't really matter where in the series it is. There are sets, there are like trilogies within the timelines, but unless you're really a stickler, you don't really have to do them in order. Same thing with the Dragon Riders of Pern. You don't really have to do them in a reading order. There are reading orders online. Follow them or don't. I think the big thing is enjoy what's available to you to enjoy and interrogate things. And sometimes you don't even have to read for the joy of the material to enjoy or to scratch the itch or to get dopamine. Parable of the Sower is not an enjoyable story because it is a terrifying look at humanity, and it almost feels like we're barreling towards a reality like what is found in it. And I highly recommend it. It's not going to be like an easy read or a breezy read. It is an important read with a capital I.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing is read whatever you want to read. Nobody should be able to shame you for reading or liking something. It doesn't matter if it's high class or low class,
It doesn't matter if you're a
grown ass.
adult and reading things from the teenager section.
Yeah, seriously, there's enough drama and strife and stuff in the real world where it's tough. So read whatever brings you pleasure. Seriously, reading for pleasure is productive in its own right.
And it's a thing that I want to do more of, which is actually what's bringing us to our summer reading program. I think we've hammered home that we are going to be doing a new series of books. I want to go through books quicker than once every 4 years. Even if they're large, even if they're small, what we are planning on doing is reading a book and splitting it into 7 pieces and doing 7-piece series. So about once a quarter on each book. We're going to be starting with Legends and Lattes by Travis, I can't remember his last name. Baldry. By Travis Baldry. It's been selected by one of our people on Discord. So if you want to have a larger voice in things, you have to come and talk to us where we are. I include a link in the description. There are ways to find it on our Patreon. I might just have to pin it on our Patreon or make sure that there's a link or something. I'm not sure. But honestly, like there are ways to get a hold of us that I actually do check. Mostly it's the Patreon and the Discord. And if you have a suggestion for something you would really like us to go over, specifically, I'd love something that hasn't been gone over to death by a bunch of people, which is kind of why we're steering away from the Cosmere. Also, it's
huge. Like again, no slight against Brandon Sanderson. I think he's a great writer and he writes a lot. And that's just it. He writes a lot. And I don't think we want to become a Brandon Sanderson podcast. There are plenty of those out there.
Right. So we're going to mostly go to our summer reading program until we either lose absolute steam, which I don't see us doing for a while, or until there's another book to talk about in the Kingkiller Chronicle.
So yeah, we've talked also about talking about the Dreamblood cycle in here, especially that first book is just fantastic. I think it would also be fun to maybe do a Scalzi book in there because those are nice and quick, perfect to break up into 7 parts.
Also, some of the books from the Avatar The Last Airbender series.
If there's another book you'd like to see us cover, put it up in the Discord. We'll chat about it. Can't say that we'll do it, but we're happy to talk about it. And with that, I'd like to thank you for potting with me.
I'd like to thank you for potting with me for the last 4 years after I came up with this crazy idea to do this podcast.
And thank you all for listening to Tales from the Waystone.
Join us next time as we go over what may or may not canonically be the prelude to the 3rd book.
Many thanks to our friend Shawnee Jang for our theme music.
And thank you very much to Patrick Rothfuss for creating this series that we have enjoyed exploring, and we hope that you do give us more entries to, but if you don't, I want you to live your best life more than I want another book from you.
Yeah, you don't need to torture yourself.
I doubt he's listening.
Probably not.
over the last 4 years, I've been the editor and the social media coordinator as much as I've bothered to be on social media regarding this. It's waxed and waned, but I've enjoyed meeting a lot of you through our Instagram and through our Discord and through other outlets that I may no longer be on.
And I've enjoyed writing all of these episodes up and coming up with our theming and really diving into how we want to talk about all this stuff.
And you've done a good job.
Thank you. If you'd like to help support us, you can always join us on the Discord. That's the greatest way to really interact with us, I think. Both of us are on there fairly frequently, and whether that's just sharing memes or sharing funny stories or
Theories,
theories or just general conversational,
bullshit.
yeah, we're happy to hang out, here for laughs, and we're here to support people. And you can also, if you feel so inclined, support us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/waystonepod. If you have the means and feel the desire to do so, you can become a patron. We've got things like special solstice and equinox bonus pods.
We just released, like yesterday, the second of our deep dives into I Hate Fairyland.
And then you'll also find things like art projects and other fun little goodies here and there. So here's to one more day above the roses.
To one more day above the roses.
Ding!
Ding!
Happy New Year. Welcome to Tales from the Waystone, and Happy New Year, everyone. I know 2024 has been a struggle for a lot of people. It's been for us here as well in our part of the world. I just want y'all to know we're thinking of you. I know 2025 is going to have a lot of challenges for all of us.
Lift the mood, dude.